The final buzzer sounded in Dallas, and the scoreboard told a story that nobody in Indiana wanted to read. 95-80. The Dallas Wings walked off that floor with a convincing preseason victory over the Indiana Fever.
Had the fifth highest scoring rookie season last year as Clark gets by Beckers and gets to the rim.
Downhill.
And while the numbers at the top of the box score represent a loss, the real conversation centers on something far more complicated than a simple win or a simple defeat. Because what unfolded over the course of those 4 quarters was a study in contrast. A study in what happens when one player shows up completely and an entire supporting cast treats the basketball like it carries a biological hazard. Let's be direct about this. Let's not dance around it. Caitlin Clark delivered. She delivered in a way that was aggressive, efficient, and at times genuinely electrifying. And the rest of the Indiana Fever roster largely did not. That is the story.
Obviously, I thought the refs did a really good job tonight on it, actually, and that's kind of been their focus going into this season is, I know there was a committee of people that really wanted them to start calling things, and I thought they did a great job of that, honestly. I thought the refs were great, and it's a preseason game, so you're probably going to see more fouls called. I would expect the number to drop. I don't know how many fouls in total were called tonight, and at times it can make the game choppy, but I think overall it's going to improve the product. Players aren't getting held, and it was both ways. I thought they did a good job both ways, so, but overall I feel fine.
That is the uncomfortable, frustrating, maddening truth of this particular game. And if you care about where this franchise is heading, if you care about what this team is capable of becoming, then you cannot look away from that reality. You have to sit with it, examine it, and ask the difficult questions that come with it. Start with the first quarter, because the first quarter gave Indiana fans exactly what they have been waiting to see. Clark came out of the gate with purpose. She was aggressive. She was decisive. She was attacking the basket with the kind of conviction that separates good players from franchise cornerstones. 14 points in the opening period, 4 of 5 from the field, 2 assists. She was the engine of everything Indiana was trying to do offensively, and it showed. The Fever led at the end of that first quarter, and for a moment, it genuinely felt like this was going to be a different kind of game. It was not going to be a different kind of game. The second quarter arrived, and with it came a collapse so sudden and so complete that it almost required a double take. Dallas went on a 13-2 run that effectively ended Indiana's competitive chances before halftime had even arrived. The ball was taken out of Clark's hands. The rhythm that had been built evaporated. Possessions turned stagnant. Energy on the defensive end disappeared. By the time teams retreated to their respective locker rooms, Dallas led 61-46, a 15-point halftime deficit constructed largely in a single quarter against a Dallas Wings team that by any fair assessment is not among the elite rosters in this league. That detail matters. This was not a loss to the New York Liberty. This was not a loss to the Las Vegas Aces. This was the Dallas Wings, and Indiana allowed them to build a double-digit cushion with relative ease because the moment Clark stopped being the focal point of the offense, the entire operation ground to a halt. Now let's talk about the box score because the numbers tell this story with brutal precision. Caitlin Clark finished with 21 points, 4 of 6 from the field, 2 of 3 from beyond the arc, 11 of 13 from the free throw line, 2 rebounds, 4 assists. That is a performance that belongs in any conversation about individual excellence, and it happened in what is supposed to be a low-stakes exhibition environment. She was not coasting. She was not managing minutes. She was competing, and she was doing it at a level that made the performance of virtually everyone around her look that much more glaring by comparison. Kelsey Mitchell was the only other Fever player who offered anything resembling consistent offense, 10 points on 4 of 12 shooting. Her contribution was real but inconsistent, arriving in isolated moments rather than as a sustained force that complemented what Clark was building. Beyond Mitchell, the numbers become genuinely difficult to defend. Damiris Dantas shot 2 of 11 from the field. Monique Billings and Jessica Timmons failed to make any meaningful offensive impact. And Sophie Cunningham, a player who brings physicality and shooting ability when engaged, did not attempt a single field goal shot during this game. Not one. Read that again. Not one field goal attempt. In a game where Indiana needed every available offensive contribution, one of their rotation players went the entire contest without once pulling the trigger from the field. That is a problem. That is not a minor adjustment. That is a fundamental question about engagement, aggression, and readiness. Meanwhile, on the other side of the floor, Dallas was executing. Paige Buickers led the Wings with 20 points and 3 assists. Satau Sabali contributed 12 points. Natasha Hines-Allen added 7. Dallas did not need a superhero performance from any single player. They needed balanced contribution, rotational discipline, and the ability to capitalize on Indiana's defensive breakdowns. They got all 3. Now, it is worth acknowledging the absences. Aaliyah Boston did not play. Lexi Hull did not play. Those are meaningful contributors whose presence would have altered some of the dynamics on the floor. But even with those concessions made, a lineup that includes Caitlin Clark, Kelsey Mitchell, and Sophie Cunningham should not surrender a 15-point halftime deficit to this Dallas team. Should not. The talent is present. The execution was not. There was a sequence in this game that crystallized the entire problem in a single, almost theatrical moment. Clark made passes that created real, genuine, open opportunities for teammates, clean looks, catchable balls, the kind of opportunities that professional basketball players are expected to convert. And the teammates treated those passes like they were handling something hazardous. Hesitation where there should have been aggression. Uncertainty where there should have been instinct. It was the basketball equivalent of watching someone handed a solution and choosing to stare at it instead. There is also the matter of the defensive end, because the offensive struggles at least had the context of absent players to partially explain them. The defensive collapses had no such cushion. Dallas found driving lanes. Perimeter looks materialized without resistance. Rotations were slow, communication was inconsistent, and the Wings built genuine confidence as the second quarter progressed and into the second half. The defensive intensity that has been held up as a foundational identity of this program was largely invisible during the game's most critical stretches. That pattern, by the way, has emerged before. The second quarter has been a recurring point of vulnerability for this team under current leadership. Opponents have repeatedly come out in that period and seized control of games that Indiana had managed reasonably well through the opening minutes. That is not coincidence. That is a structural issue that demands serious examination, and the expectation that it will resolve itself without deliberate intervention is wishful thinking. Then there was the moment that briefly stopped everything. Clark took contact on a 3-point attempt. It was ruled a flagrant foul. The reaction from observers was immediate, because anyone who has followed this franchise over the past year knows how fragile momentum can be when health concerns enter the picture. After the play, Clark was evaluated near the bench area. She remained standing, walking without obvious distress, jacket on, observing the game from the sideline. The visual reassurance provided some relief. But in preseason, the calculus around health is always weighted toward caution, and the suggestion from some observers that holding her out of Saturday's action might be worth considering was entirely reasonable given the context.
You were rubbing your knee and then you were a little bit. Is it your knee, your ankle? What exactly was bothering you?
I just landed on my kneecap really hard.
That second quarter, you guys bled a ton of points. What did you see as the issues you guys had?
Yeah, I think just, a little undisciplined, just soft defensively. We have to be more connected as a group. I didn't feel like we were very connected as 5 working together, and you're going to need to help your teammates. Defense is hard, especially when they get us in rotations, but also, our offense wasn't very good, and that's hard when you miss shots and turn the ball over to try to get your defense set and try to get to your matchups. So it's a little of both, but overall, we just have to play better defense. There's gonna be moments where we miss shots, and there's gonna be moments where, things don't go our way, we have to find a way to play better defense, and we will. And, we're still learning, Mo and Mai, we haven't played with them. So I think our just connectedness will improve, and it has to.
What makes all of this particularly compelling is not the loss itself. Preseason results are diagnostic tools, not verdicts. The standings don't move. Postseason implications don't shift. These games exist to build habits, evaluate rotations, and begin constructing the connective tissue that makes a basketball team function as a cohesive unit rather than a collection of individuals. In that framework, some of what unfolded in the first quarter was genuinely encouraging. Clark's willingness to attack the basket was the most significant positive takeaway from this game. When she drove into the lane, she forced defensive decisions. She collapsed coverage, drew contact, and converted at the free throw line at a remarkably efficient rate. 11 of 13 is not luck. That is craft. That is a player who has identified a pathway to sustained production and is actively developing the habit of walking through that door. If she continues to prioritize interior aggression alongside her perimeter shooting, the offensive ceiling for both her individually and the team collectively rises substantially. Her shot also showed signs of returning to form. 2 of 3 from three-point range is a small sample, but the mechanics looked cleaner. The release looked more confident. There was a version of Caitlin Clark in that first quarter who looked ready to remind everyone why the conversation about her impact on this league never really stops, regardless of what month it is. That version needs more company, because the broader challenge facing this franchise right now is not Caitlin Clark. She is doing her part. She is more than doing her part. The challenge is building around her in a way that actually supports what she is trying to create. Teammates who catch the ball and make decisions. Teammates who take shots when shots are available. Teammates who match the competitive intensity she brings from the opening possession rather than requiring her to carry the full weight of the offensive load until the deficit becomes unmanageable. Kelsey Mitchell has the capability to be that second voice offensively. There were moments where her scoring presence provided real complementary value, but 4 of 12 from the field is not where that needs to live consistently. Sophie Cunningham's physical profile and shooting ability make her a genuine weapon when she is engaged and aggressive. 0 field goal attempts is not engaged. That cannot happen again if Indiana wants to build genuine competitive depth. Earlier in the preseason, against the Liberty, there was a different kind of story. When the starters struggled, Indiana's bench unit stepped in and provided enough energy and production to shift the dynamic. That version of depth, that capacity for different players to step into the breach and contribute, was nowhere to be found against Dallas. The bench did not swing this game. The bench did not rescue the deficit. The bench did not provide the kind of infusion that competitive basketball teams rely on when the starters need relief. That inconsistency is the thread that ties the most difficult questions together. Who are the Indiana Fever when Caitlin Clark is not producing at an elite level? Who carries the second possession? Who closes out a quarter with a bucket when she is resting? Who makes a defensive stop in a critical moment? Those questions do not have clear answers right now, and that uncertainty is what makes a game like this one sting beyond the surface level of a preseason defeat. The final score was 95-80. That gap was built on a foundation of second-quarter failure, offensive passivity from multiple rotation players, and a defensive performance that gave a Wings team too many easy paths to the basket. The game was nearly unwatchable from the midpoint of the second quarter onward, and that is a difficult thing to say about a roster that holds this much potential. But here is what remains worth holding on to. Caitlin Clark looked like herself. Not last year's version navigating the physical adjustment of a professional rookie season. Not a version managing her way through contact and inconsistent officiating without the benefit of foul calls. This version drew fouls. This version got to the free throw line 13 times and was clinical about it. This version drove to the basket with conviction and scored 14 points before most fans had finished their opening snack. This version played 21 points worth of basketball in a game her team lost by 15 against a team with no Aaliyah Boston, no Lexi Hull, and no real secondary firepower to speak of. That is both the promise and the problem laid out in a single game. The promise is Caitlin Clark building toward something real. Building toward the kind of complete offensive season that this league has genuinely not seen before if the supporting infrastructure around her can hold up. The problem is that right now, the supporting infrastructure is treating basketballs like they are radioactive, leaving points on the floor that this team cannot afford to leave, and losing games to opponents they should be defeating in a preseason environment designed to create competitive confidence. There is still time, there is still runway, but the clock is running, and right now, only one player on the Indiana Fever is acting like she knows it.